Eleanor Crawford sat at her small oak kitchen table, the soft morning sunlight filtering through the curtains and highlighting the silver streaks in her tightly curled hair. At 70 years old, her slightly overweight frame had softened over the years, yet her posture remained remarkably straight, a testament to the pride and discipline she had cultivated throughout her life. Her brown eyes, deep and intelligent, scanned a neatly organized ledger filled with numbers she had meticulously recorded over decades. Every dollar, every deposit, every investment was accounted for. Money, she had learned long ago, was more than currency. It was power, security, freedom. For years, she had lived a quiet, disciplined life. After her husband's passing, she had raised her son Robert alone, ensuring he received a proper education, a stable upbringing, and every opportunity she herself had sacrificed to provide. She had sewn clothes, taken on odd jobs, and saved with relentless diligence, ensuring that by the time she reached her 70s, she could live independently without fear of anyone taking advantage of her. Yet, as she sipped her morning coffee, a simmering anxiety gnawed at her. The past month had been a whirlwind. Her home, the beach house she had painstakingly built, had been invaded. Megan, her daughter-in-law, and Robert had brazenly entered the house without permission, claiming ownership under false pretenses. They had gone so far as to falsify medical documents declaring Eleanor mentally incompetent, an audacious attempt to seize the property. She had worked her entire life to secure Eleanor's fingers tightened around the coffee mug, the porcelain warm in her hands. The betrayal stung deeper than she had anticipated. She had raised Robert with all her heart, sacrificed sleep, money, and personal dreams. Yet here he was standing beside the woman who had manipulated him into participating in a scheme to rob her of everything. It was precisely this thought that brought clarity. She would not cower. She would not allow herself to be humiliated or robbed. Not at 70 years old. She had the resources, the knowledge, and now, the resolve. Her first stop that morning was the bank. Alex Peterson, her longtime bank manager of 15 years, greeted her with a warm yet professional smile. "Eleanor, how can I help you today? I need the exact balance of all my accounts, and I need to discuss a delicate legal matter," she replied, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. Alex nodded, tapping away at his computer. Numbers appeared on the screen, and for the first time in days, Eleanor felt a spark of relief. $87,000 in savings, $23,000 in certificates of deposit, $12,000 in her checking account, a total of $122,000. She allowed herself a small, victorious smile. Megan had miscalculated. They had assumed she was a poor old widow, dependent solely on a modest pension, but Eleanor Crawford had been preparing for situations like this her entire life. "Mr. Peterson," she said, regaining composure, "I need you to freeze any attempts by third parties to access my accounts, and I need an official letter confirming my mental capacity to manage my finances." His face grew serious. "Is there a problem?" "My family is trying to declare me mentally incompetent so they can take my assets," she stated plainly. He frowned. "That is very serious. You'll need specialized legal help." "Yes, please, recommend someone." Alex handed her the card of Thomas Gallagher, a highly regarded lawyer specializing in family law and asset fraud. "Tell him I sent you," Alex said. "He's the best for cases like this." Armed with a renewed sense of purpose, Eleanor left the bank. The knowledge that she had the means to protect herself lent her a mental clarity she had not felt in weeks. She called Thomas Gallagher from the parking lot. His secretary scheduled her for the same afternoon. The hours until the appointment were spent gathering evidence. She collected the original property documents, receipts for the last 20 years, photographs of stolen items, and even screenshots of Veronica Megan's sister bragging about her new beach house on social media. Every scrap of evidence mattered. By 4 o'clock, Eleanor entered Thomas Gallagher's elegant office. The lawyer was in his mid-60s, silver-haired with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to assess her immediately. His manner was professional yet welcoming, inspiring confidence. "Mrs. Crawford, tell me everything from the beginning," he urged. "Don't leave out a single detail." She spoke for an hour, recounting every insult, every act of betrayal, every falsified document, and every theft. Thomas took meticulous notes, asking precise, pointed questions that revealed his experience with cases exactly like hers. "Do you have the original property documents?" he asked. "Yes, every penny of construction was paid by me, and I have receipts for all 20 years." And the doctor who signed the dementia report, have you ever seen him? Never. I don't even know his name. Thomas nodded. That's falsification of medical documents, federal crime. And you have documentation for the stolen jewelry? Yes, some of it, like my late husband's gold watch, is insured for $3,000. Thomas smiled faintly. Your case is solid. Trespassing, robbery, document falsification, attempted asset fraud, possibly medical corruption. Your family has overstepped. What can we do? Eleanor asked. Thomas outlined a 4-step plan. File an eviction lawsuit, report the theft, report falsified medical documents, and request a restraining order. The eviction can be immediate if the judge sees clear evidence, he added. How much will it cost? She asked. My fees are $5,000 for the entire process. I can pay today, she said firmly. Thomas's smile widened. I like clients who take their defense seriously. Mrs. Crawford, your family underestimated you. I've been preparing to defend myself for 70 years. I'm not stopping now, she said, her voice resolute. Are you willing to go all the way? Your relationship with your son will likely be irreparable. She paused, reflecting on Robert, the boy she had loved, the man he could have become, and the coward he had become. If our relationship can break so easily over money, then it was never a real relationship. He had his chance to apologize before betraying me. Apologies after the fact don't count. Thomas nodded. Understood. We'll proceed. The drive back to her hotel was filled with a strange exhilaration. She felt no fear, only a renewed sense of agency. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe she would not be humiliated, robbed, or belittled. Eleanor Crawford was ready for war. The morning air was crisp as Eleanor Crawford arrived at the downtown courthouse, the saltiness from the nearby ocean still lingering faintly on her skin. Her slightly rounded figure was wrapped in a tailored navy blue suit, chosen deliberately for its professional yet authoritative look. At 70, she moved with the grace of someone used to carrying the weight of responsibility, not only her own life but the lives of others she had once nurtured. Her brown eyes scanned the building, noting the bustle of lawyers, clerks, and citizens. Each face was an unknown, but none intimidated her. Her lawyer, Thomas Gallagher, led her through the maze of marble corridors, his own presence exuding calm confidence. Today is procedural, he explained, but every procedural victory counts. We'll file for eviction first, then move to asset protection. I need you sharp, focused, and above all, composed. Eleanor nodded. I've been composed for 70 years, Mr. Gallagher. I can do one more morning in a courthouse. As they entered the clerk's office, Thomas presented their documentation, the property deeds, receipts spanning decades, photographs of her home, and medical reports falsified by Megan and her accomplices. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression, scanned the papers carefully, her fingers tapping rapidly on the keyboard. This looks comprehensive, she finally said, looking up. You're filing for immediate eviction of your son and daughter. Yes, Eleanor said firmly. They entered my property without consent and are illegally claiming ownership. The clerk raised an eyebrow but processed the documents efficiently, providing a court date 2 weeks ahead. Eleanor felt a surge of satisfaction. The first procedural step had been taken. Outside the courthouse, the reality of the confrontation settled in. Megan had already started spreading rumors in their social circle, painting Eleanor as a greedy, paranoid old woman trying to displace a loving young family. Eleanor's mind, however, was unshaken. Reputation mattered, but justice mattered more. Over the next few days, she and Thomas prepared meticulously. Eleanor catalogued every stolen item, jewelry, heirlooms, furniture, and recorded a timeline of events leading to Megan and Robert's illegal occupation of her property. Each night, she reviewed her notes, cross-checking dates and receipts, ensuring no detail could be questioned. At home, she practiced her statements aloud, her voice echoing through the empty rooms she had once shared with her husband. I am mentally competent. I am the rightful owner. I will not be intimidated, she rehearsed, the words building a rhythm of courage and defiance. 2 days before the court date, Thomas arranged a meeting with a forensic document analyst to examine the fraudulent medical records. Eleanor accompanied him, observing the meticulous examination with fascination. They falsified signatures, dates, and even the physician's credentials. The analyst confirmed, this is clear-cut forgery. If presented properly, it could lead to criminal charges. Thomas nodded approvingly. Good, we'll include this in the court filing. The morning of the court hearing arrived. Eleanor's heart beat steadily, not from fear, but from anticipation. She donned a fresh navy suit, her short curly hair perfectly set, a subtle gold necklace resting against her chest. She carried herself like a woman who had lived her life fully and would not let anyone take it away. As she entered the courtroom, she noticed Megan and Robert already seated. Megan flaunting designer attire, a forced smile plastered across her face. Robert avoided eye contact, his expression conflicted. Eleanor's gaze, however, was unwavering. The judge, an imposing woman in her 50s, presided with a sharp, no-nonsense demeanor. "We are here regarding the matter of Eleanor Crawford versus Robert Crawford and Megan Crawford. Are both parties ready?" Thomas rose, presenting the evidence systematically. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Crawford, is the rightful owner of the property in question. The defendants entered the property without consent, have attempted to falsify medical records to claim ownership, and have removed personal property without authorization." He handed the forged medical documents to the judge. "These records, purportedly indicating Mrs. Crawford's incompetence, are fraudulent. We have evidence verified by a certified forensic document analyst confirming the forgery." Megan interjected, her voice slightly trembling. "Your Honor, we only acted in what we thought was my mother-in-law's best interest. She has been difficult. Difficult does not constitute illegal eviction." Thomas replied calmly but firmly. The judge examined the documents, her sharp eyes scanning the pages. "These allegations are serious," she said. "Given the evidence provided, I am granting a temporary injunction for immediate eviction of the defendants from the property. Further proceedings will occur to determine long-term ownership and restitution for stolen items." Eleanor felt a surge of relief. Justice, at least for the moment, had been served. She maintained a composed smile, refusing to let Megan see the satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. After the court session, Thomas suggested a celebratory lunch. Eleanor declined, choosing instead to return home and oversee the restoration of her house. She inspected each room carefully, noting what had been moved or tampered with. Every item replaced or repaired was a small victory, a reclaiming of her space and dignity. That evening, as she sat by the window watching the sunset over the ocean, Eleanor reflected on the battle she had begun. The legal war had only just started, but she felt invincible. 70 years had taught her resilience, strategy, and patience. Megan and Robert may have underestimated her, but Eleanor Crawford was no ordinary 70-year-old widow. She was a woman who had lived fully, sacrificed deeply, and now she would fight ruthlessly for what was rightfully hers. Her phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. "Prepare for the next steps. Asset protection and criminal filings next. Are you ready?" Eleanor typed back, her fingers steady and deliberate. "I've been ready all my life. Let them come." As darkness fell over the coastal town, Eleanor felt an exhilaration she hadn't felt in decades. The storm was coming, but she was standing at the eye of it calm, resolute, and unafraid. The courthouse halls were quiet that morning, but Eleanor Crawford's mind was anything but. At 70, she had learned that patience was a weapon, as sharp as any legal argument. Her brown eyes, deep and perceptive, scanned the surroundings with vigilance. Clad in a charcoal gray pantsuit that accentuated her dignified yet approachable presence, she felt the weight of her mission pressing against her shoulders and she welcomed it. Thomas Gallagher, her lawyer, was already waiting. "The defendants have filed a counterclaim," he said, handing her a sheaf of papers. "They're alleging emotional distress and claiming you interfered with their family life. Typical diversionary tactics." Eleanor frowned. "Emotional distress? From me simply protecting what's mine? They've got nerve." Her voice was firm, calm, and carried the authority of a woman who had lived through decades of personal trials. "Exactly," Thomas said, tapping his pen against the stack of documents. "But it's more than nerve. They're attempting to muddy the waters and delay proceedings. We'll need to be meticulous, precise, and relentless." Back at her home, Eleanor began reviewing the counterclaim. Megan and Robert had hired a high-priced attorney, known for aggressive litigation. The documents were dense, filled with legal jargon intended to confuse and intimidate, but Eleanor had an advantage. She knew her life, her property, and the truth intimately. Over the next several days, she and Thomas compiled responses. Every allegation was dissected, every vague accusation countered with solid evidence. Photos of tampered furniture, recorded conversations, receipts, and affidavits from neighbors who had witnessed Megan and Robert's unlawful occupation were catalogued meticulously. One evening, as she prepared the documents in her sunlit living room, Ella Lanner paused, reflecting on her journey. She poured herself a glass of iced tea, the condensation beating against the glass, and let her mind wander. 70 years had taught her resilience. She had survived personal losses, business failures, and the relentless tide of time itself. Megan and Robert's attempts at manipulation were nothing compared to the storms she had weathered. The day of the next hearing arrived. Ella Lanner entered the courtroom with deliberate calm, her slightly rounded figure moving confidently, her curly hair neatly arranged. At 70, she carried herself with the poise of someone who had endured life's trials and emerged unbroken. Megan and Robert were already present, their expressions tense. Megan's designer attire seemed incongruous with the anxiety in her eyes. The judge, an imposing woman with sharp features, presided again. "We are reconvened to address the counterclaims and further proceedings in the matter of Ella Crawford versus Robert and Megan Crawford. Are all parties ready?" Thomas rose, presenting their counter-evidence systematically. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Crawford, has provided comprehensive documentation proving that the defendants entered her property without consent, falsified records, and removed personal property illegally. Their counterclaim is without merit and appears designed to delay rightful restitution." The judge examined the exhibits. "This is substantial. I expect detailed responses from the defendant's counsel, but preliminary review indicates strong evidence supporting Mrs. Crawford's claims." Megan's attorney attempted to interrupt, claiming procedural errors and questioning the legitimacy of some witnesses. Ella Lanner, seated calmly beside Thomas, observed silently. Every attempt to discredit her case was met with precise Thomas's voice was steady, measured, cutting through the theatrics with clarity. Outside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Ella Lanner knew that Megan and Robert were attempting to leverage social pressure, manipulating perceptions to sway sympathizers. But Ella Lanner was prepared. She began organizing community allies, neighbors, friends, and professionals who could testify to her competence and character. Each new affidavit strengthened her position, reinforcing the narrative of a woman wronged but unyielding. On home, she also began strategizing her next legal moves. She consulted with Thomas about filing criminal charges for forgery and theft, while simultaneously preparing for asset protection filings. Her evenings were spent reviewing documents, making notes, and rehearsing testimony in front of a mirror. "I am the rightful owner," she murmured to herself one night, her reflection mirroring a woman who refused to be diminished by age, size, or circumstance. "I will reclaim everything." Meanwhile, Megan and Robert, frustrated by the mounting evidence against them, escalated their tactics. They sent threatening letters, attempted to intimidate witnesses, and even tried to gain media attention, framing themselves as victims of an unfair elderly parent. Ella Lanner, however, remained undeterred. She documented every harassment, ensuring that each attempt to intimidate her became part of the growing evidence against them. The next hearing was a turning point. Thomas presented the compiled affidavits, photographs of property tampering, and digital records of Megan and Robert's financial transactions. The judge listened intently, occasionally nodding in acknowledgement. The courtroom, usually a place of formal decorum, felt charged with tension and anticipation. Megan, visibly frustrated, whispered urgently to her attorney, "We need a settlement. This is spinning out of control." Robert's jaw tightened, and he avoided eye contact with Ella. The weight of their misdeeds was becoming undeniable. The judge finally spoke. "Given the overwhelming evidence, I am granting temporary protective orders in favor of Mrs. Crawford. Defendants are barred from entering the property, and all removed items must be returned pending further proceedings. I also encourage the parties to consider mediation for the remaining disputes, though this does not preclude ongoing legal action." A wave of relief washed over Ella. The courtroom's tension shifted slightly, favoring her. She had not only defended her home, but had also exposed the defendant's underhanded tactics later. As she returned home, she walked slowly through each room, inspecting the house that was slowly being restored to order. Each repaired item, each returned possession, symbolized a small victory. Yet Eleanor knew the battle was far from over. Megan and Robert would fight back, likely more aggressively than before. That night, she sat by the window, watching the waves crash against the shore. The fight had escalated, but Ella Lanner Crawford was ready. 70 years of life had honed her instincts, sharpened her patience, and strengthened her resolve. She would not be intimidated. She would not be defeated. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Thomas, Prepare for the next filings. Criminal charges and asset recovery will follow. They're not done yet. Eleanor smiled faintly, a gleam of determination lighting her eyes. Neither am I, she typed back, her fingers steady and resolute. As the coastal night deepened, Eleanor sat in quiet anticipation. The storm was intensifying, the legal battle escalating, but she was a woman forged in resilience, strategy, and unyielding determination. Megan and Robert had underestimated her. They had awakened a force that would not rest until justice was fully realized. The morning fog hung low over the coastal town as Ella Crawford prepared for what she knew would be the most decisive legal maneuver yet. At 70, she had learned to read people like open books, to anticipate the moves of those who underestimated her. Her brown eyes, sharp and discerning, scanned the stacks of legal documents on her mahogany desk. Every affidavit, every photograph, every recorded conversation was meticulously organized. She traced her fingers along the edges, silently affirming her control over the storm that was about to unfold. Thomas Gallagher, ever her steadfast ally, entered carrying a manila folder thick with new evidence. "This is it, Mrs. Crawford," he said, placing it carefully in front of her. "Financial records, falsified contracts, and documented harassment. We have enough to initiate criminal charges for fraud, theft, and intimidation." Eleanor nodded, her curly hair catching the morning light as she adjusted her charcoal gray blazer. Slightly fuller in figure but imposing in presence, she exuded authority without aggression. "Let's proceed. They've pushed us too far." The courthouse was alive with murmurs as she and Thomas approached the judge's chambers. Megan and Robert had shown up with their usual veneer of composure, but Eleanor could sense the tension. Megan's designer suit was sharply tailored, but the nervous twitch of her hand betrayed her anxiety. Robert, tall and rigid, avoided eye contact entirely. Inside the chambers, the judge, a stern woman with years of experience in complex litigation, reviewed the new filings. "Mrs. Crawford, your filings are substantial. The evidence suggests deliberate, fraudulent activity and interference with your property. I am ordering an immediate review by the county prosecutor. You are advised that criminal investigations may proceed concurrently with civil proceedings." Eleanor felt a thrill of satisfaction but kept her composure. "Thank you, Your Honor," she replied. "We are prepared to cooperate fully." Outside, reporters had begun to gather, sensing the escalation. Megan attempted to turn the narrative in her favor, speaking to the media about alleged mistreatment of the elderly, but her statements were quickly countered by Elena's press release, which included photographic evidence and witness statements. The tide of public perception was shifting toward truth. Back at her home, Eleanor began the painstaking task of preparing for testimony. She practiced responses to every potential question, ensuring her voice remained steady and her expressions neutral yet authoritative. She knew that every misstep could be weaponized against her. At 70, with a slight heaviness to her frame, she carried herself with the poise of someone accustomed to command and scrutiny. The next court date was chaotic. The prosecutor entered with a team of investigators, each carrying files and digital evidence. The courtroom, usually a stage for formal decorum, had the electricity of a high-stakes showdown. Thomas began presenting the findings: forged signatures on contracts, unauthorized bank transactions, and correspondence proving attempts to intimidate witnesses. The evidence was overwhelming. Megan and Robert's attorney scrambled to counter, raising technical objections and attempting to discredit the documents, but Thomas dismantled each argument with precision. Megan's frustration became visible. She whispered furiously to her attorney, her lips pressed into a thin line. Robert's hands shook slightly as he attempted to maintain composure. The veneer of control they had maintained for weeks was cracking. The judge, reviewing the evidence, spoke with gravity. "Given the strength of the evidence, I am authorizing the prosecutor to proceed with criminal investigation. Furthermore, temporary protective measures will remain in place, and defendants are prohibited from contacting any witnesses or interfering with the property in question." Eleanor allowed herself a brief exhale, her eyes glinting with determination. This was a pivotal moment. Justice was finally catching up to those who had sought to manipulate and intimidate her. Later that evening, she returned home, walking through the familiar spaces of her house. Each room, once disrupted by the defendants, now felt like a bastion of regained control. The scent of polished wood and fresh linen filled the air, mingling with the salty breeze drifting through open windows. She paused by the fireplace, considering the battle ahead. Meghan and Robert would not surrender easily. Their desperation would only escalate. Over the next few days, Eleanor coordinated with the investigators, providing detailed insights and clarifications. Her proactive involvement allowed the authorities to act swiftly, gathering further evidence and corroborating witness statements. She even visited a local notary who had been coerced into witnessing falsified documents, ensuring their testimony was ready for court. Meghan and Robert, realizing the legal net tightening around them, attempted a last-ditch maneuver. They sent anonymous tips to local authorities, trying to frame Eleanor for financial impropriety. But Eleanor's meticulous record-keeping and transparent dealings quickly exposed the ploy. The attempt backfired spectacularly, further cementing her credibility and casting doubt on the defendant's integrity. By the end of the week, Eleanor had effectively turned the tables. The narrative of harassment and theft was now firmly under her control. Meghan and Robert, once aggressive and dominating, were on the defensive. Their credibility eroded in both the legal system and the court of public opinion. Sitting in her study late at night, Eleanor reflected on the progression of events. The battle had escalated beyond a civil dispute. It was now a full-scale counterstrike, exposing deceit and demanding accountability. At 70, she felt a surge of energy, a testament to her resilience and unwavering commitment to justice. Her phone buzzed with a message from Thomas. They're desperate. Prepare for the arraignment. Expect theatrics and possibly public interference. We're ready, Eleanor typed back, her fingers steady and confident. Let them try. The truth is on our side. The night deepened, the waves outside crashing rhythmically against the shore. Eleanor Crawford, undeterred and resolute, knew that the fight was far from over. But she had seized the initiative. The counterstrike was in motion, and the forces of deception were beginning to unravel. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Justice was no longer a distant goal, it was within reach, and Eleanor Crawford was determined to see it realized in full. The morning sun barely pierced through the thick clouds as Eleanor Crawford entered the courthouse, her presence commanding despite her slightly fuller frame. At 70, she moved with deliberate precision, each step echoing the years of experience she carried. Her dark brown eyes, keen and unwavering, scanned the room as she made her way to the plaintiff's table. Her curly hair framed her face, lending her a dignified authority that contrasted sharply with the nervous energy emanating from the defendants. Meghan and Robert arrived moments later, their carefully maintained composure starting to crack. Meghan's lips pressed into a tight line, her designer suit impeccably tailored but doing little to mask her anxiety. Robert, taller than most in the courtroom, seemed rigid, the weight of their unraveling scheme pressing down on his broad shoulders. Judge Hammond, a seasoned jurist with a reputation for cutting through theatrics, called the court to order. We are here to review the consolidated evidence in the Crawford versus Nolan case. All parties are expected to present their arguments, and the court will hear witness testimony. Eleanor adjusted the stack of documents before her, her fingers tracing the edges of affidavits and photographs. Each piece had been meticulously organized by Thomas Gallagher, her loyal legal counsel, ensuring a seamless presentation. Thomas began presenting financial records that revealed the depth of Meghan and Robert's fraudulent activities. He detailed unauthorized bank transactions, falsified property contracts, and a web of harassment aimed at intimidating Eleanor. The courtroom absorbed every word, the weight of the evidence pressing heavily on the defendants. Meghan attempted to interject, her voice trembling slightly. Your Honor, these documents are fabricated. This is a witch hunt. Judge Hammond raised a hand. Ms. Nolan, the court will hear all objections in due course. Continue, Mr. Gallagher. Thomas presented witness testimony next. A local notary described the coercion used to falsify documents. Neighbors recounted instances of intimidation and property tampering. Eleanor, sitting poised, occasionally nodded subtly, her presence reinforcing the credibility of the accounts. Midway through the proceedings, Meghan tried a bold maneuver. She submitted a set of anonymous allegations aimed at discrediting Eleanor, suggesting financial impropriety on her part. The court paused, examining the new claims carefully, but Eleanor, anticipating such a move, had already prepared thorough documentation proving transparency and integrity in every transaction. With calm authority, she rose, her voice steady and commanding. Your Honor, these allegations are unfounded. Every document and transaction in question has been independently verified. I welcome a review, but the attempt to deflect responsibility onto me is baseless," the courtroom murmured. Megan's confident facade was crumbling, Robert shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Their desperation was palpable. Thomas seized the moment to introduce additional evidence, recordings of Megan and Robert discussing strategies to manipulate and intimidate witnesses, conversations revealing deliberate deception. The judge reviewed the recordings, her expression unreadable but her pen moving rapidly across notes. By late afternoon, the courtroom had become a theater of tension. Elilanor's meticulous preparation contrasted sharply with the defendant's increasingly frantic attempts at obstruction. Every objection raised by Megan was countered with factual precision. Every attempt to sway public perception was neutralized by Elilanor's transparent records and credible witnesses. Judge Hammond finally leaned forward, her voice resonant. "The evidence presented today is substantial. The court recognizes the severity of the defendant's actions, including fraud, intimidation, and interference with property rights. Temporary protective measures will remain in place, and the prosecutor is authorized to proceed with criminal charges." Megan's shoulders slumped slightly, a rare crack in her otherwise controlled demeanor. Robert avoided eye contact entirely, his jaw tight with suppressed frustration. The courtroom, once tense with uncertainty, now seemed to shift in favor of Eleanor. After the hearing, Eleanor stepped outside, greeted by a mix of supporters and journalists. She answered questions with poise, her slightly heavier frame moving confidently among the crowd. Her statement was concise, firm, and resonant. "Truth and justice cannot be intimidated. Those who attempt deceit will be held accountable, no matter how elaborate their schemes." Back at home, Eleanor reflected on the day's events. The legal battlefield had tilted decisively, but she knew this was far from the end. Megan and Robert were not easily defeated. Their desperation could lead to unpredictable actions. She reviewed the next steps with Thomas, planning witness depositions and additional evidence gathering, ensuring that each move was calculated and strategic. Over the next week, Eleanor coordinated closely with the prosecutor, providing insights and clarifications that strengthened the ongoing investigation. Each piece of corroborating evidence reinforced the narrative of deliberate misconduct by the defendants. Local media, once uncertain, now reported favorably on Eleanor's meticulous and courageous approach. Megan, sensing her influence waning, attempted to rally support through social media, portraying herself as the victim of an elder's intimidation. But Eleanor's transparency and credibility rendered these attempts ineffective. Public sentiment continued to favor the truth, further isolating the defendants. Late at night, Eleanor sat by her study window, overlooking the restless sea. The rhythmic crash of waves echoed the persistence she felt within. She knew the road ahead required vigilance, strategy, and unwavering determination. Yet, she also recognized the power of resilience, of standing firm against deception and corruption. Thomas entered quietly, a folder in hand. "Next week, depositions begin. We'll need your testimony for several key witnesses. They will attempt every tactic to unsettle you." Eleanor nodded, her eyes gleaming with resolve. "Let them try. They will see that truth cannot be bent or broken." As the night deepened, she felt a sense of readiness. The tipping point had been reached. Megan and Robert's tactics, however aggressive, had been countered. The next phase of the battle would be critical, but Eleanor Crawford, with her experience, intellect, and unwavering determination, was prepared to see it through. Justice, long delayed, was finally asserting itself, and she would not allow it to falter. The courtroom felt colder than usual that morning, though the sun outside shone brilliantly over the city. Eleanor Crawford, slightly heavier than the average courtroom figure, but radiating authority, walked in with measured steps. At 70 years old, her every movement carried the weight of decades of resilience, determination, and lived experience. Her dark brown eyes, alert and piercing, scanned the room and settled on Megan and Robert, whose carefully maintained facades were beginning to show cracks. Thomas Gallagher, her lawyer, greeted her with a confident nod. "Today, we move into depositions and direct witness confrontations. Be prepared. Megan and Robert will try to unsettle you, but remain calm and factual." "I've been calm my entire life," Eleanor replied softly, adjusting the curls framing her round face. "They won't intimidate me." The morning session began with the deposition of Megan, who arrived wearing a crisp navy suit and a tightly controlled smile. The tension in the room was palpable. Eleanor, seated across from her, exuded calm authority, Her slightly rounded figure was draped in a tasteful gray dress, and her hands rested lightly on her folder of documents. Thomas began. Ms. Nolan, can you explain the sequence of events that led to your presence at Mrs. Crawford's property without her consent? Megan hesitated, her eyes darting toward Robert, who sat silently beside her. It was a misunderstanding, she muttered. We thought we had permission, Eleanor interrupted, her voice firm but composed. You entered my house without permission, destroyed property, and took valuables. Misunderstanding doesn't erase that. You attempted to steal from me, Ms. Nolan. Megan's lips trembled. She tried to respond but was interrupted again as Thomas presented evidence video footage of their initial invasion, screenshots of conversations plotting the takeover, and copies of the falsified medical report attempting to declare Elena mentally incompetent. The weight of the evidence pressed heavily on Megan, her posture stiffened, and the carefully crafted narrative of innocence began to crumble. Next, Robert was called for questioning. His broad shoulders seemed slumped under the gaze of the courtroom. His voice, when it came, was quiet, hesitant. Mom, I didn't want it to go this far, he admitted, though his eyes avoided Elana's piercing gaze. And yet you signed documents to transfer my property, and you allowed falsified medical reports to be created in your name, Eleanor said, her tone steady, emphasizing each word. Why, Robert, why choose deception over communication? Robert swallowed hard, the realization of his own mistakes sinking in. I thought it was the only way to secure a future for my children. I didn't think you'd fight back like this. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. The future of your children doesn't justify theft. It doesn't justify humiliation. You could have asked me directly, but you chose betrayal instead. Thomas interjected, presenting more evidence of Robert's complicity: the emails, the hidden communications with Megan, and his attempts to manipulate witnesses. Each piece further demonstrated a deliberate pattern of deception, leaving Robert increasingly silent. The judge, observing the interactions, noted the stark contrast between Eleanor's poised, factual demeanor and the defendant's increasingly erratic responses. It was clear which side commanded credibility. Throughout the day, Eleanor maintained her composure, answering questions clearly, calmly, and with authority. Her slightly fuller frame and mature age became symbols of resilience rather than weakness. Witnesses who had once been intimidated by Megan's confidence now spoke freely, empowered by Eleanor's unwavering presence. By mid-afternoon, the tide had turned decisively. Megan and Robert attempted to introduce new arguments, claiming misunderstanding and family context, but Eleanor and Thomas dismantled each point with factual clarity. Their strategy relied on emotions and manipulations. Eleanor's strategy relied on documented evidence and truth. The courtroom watched as the defendant's frustration grew. Megan's hands shook as she tried to organize documents. Robert avoided eye contact entirely. Each attempt to shift blame or evoke sympathy failed. Every action, every word from Eleanor reinforced the reality. She had been wronged, and she was reclaiming control. At one point, Megan snapped, "You're turning the children against us. This is elder abuse." Eleanor's eyes flashed. "Elder abuse is what you attempted, not what I am defending against. You entered my home illegally, destroyed my property, and tried to manipulate the law to take my assets. That is elder abuse in the making, and today, justice begins to correct it." The judge nodded, impressed by Eleanor's articulation and command of the facts. Thomas summarized, emphasizing the pattern of fraud, theft, and intimidation. The court was presented with an unbroken chain of evidence that left little room for doubt. By late afternoon, the final testimonies concluded. Eleanor stepped outside, greeted by a small crowd of journalists and neighbors. Her round, mature face reflected the calm triumph of someone who had prepared meticulously, anticipated every move, and maintained dignity under pressure. The media coverage began immediately. Headlines read, 70-year-old woman outmaneuvers son and daughter-in-law in high-stakes property dispute, fraud and family betrayal. Eleanor Crawford reclaims home back at home. Eleanor reviewed the day's proceedings with Thomas. "They're desperate, I can see it. But desperation leads to mistakes." "Yes," Thomas agreed. "We anticipate further legal maneuvers. They may try to appeal, file counterclaims, or even manipulate public opinion. But with the evidence we have, we control the narrative." That night, Elalana walked through her house, each room a testament to decades of hard work and careful planning. The walls bore memories of a lifetime, but also now carried the security of legal protection. She paused by the large bay window overlooking the ocean, listening to the waves crash rhythmically. It was a reminder that, no matter how chaotic life became, persistence and preparation could overcome even the most calculated betrayal. She sat in her favorite armchair, sipping tea, reflecting on the irony. Her own son had attempted to rob her under the guise of family obligation. Yet it was she who had orchestrated a strategy to reclaim justice. The realization brought a quiet satisfaction, tempered by the sadness of a relationship irreparably altered. Thomas joined her, reviewing the next steps. The plea deals and fines are likely. They've already spent a fortune on defense lawyers. Public humiliation and legal consequences will follow. Elalana nodded. Justice is not revenge, it's accountability. And today, accountability has begun. As the night deepened, she felt a sense of empowerment. For 70 years, she had faced challenges, but nothing compared to reclaiming her dignity from those she had trusted most. Tomorrow would bring another chapter in this legal battle, but Elalana Crawford's, lightly heavy, proudly American, and unyieldingly determined, was ready for whatever came next. The morning light filtered softly through the tall windows of the courthouse. Elalana Crawford, at 70, walked in with a quiet confidence that belied the tension simmering in the air. Her slightly heavier frame moved gracefully in a charcoal dress, the curls around her round face perfectly in place. Today was not about confrontation. It was about final strategy, precision, and closure. Thomas Gallagher, her longtime attorney, had spent the previous night meticulously preparing the closing arguments. Today, we finalize everything, he said. Every piece of evidence, every testimony. They will see clearly who acted in bad faith and who has lived with integrity. Elalana nodded. I've been preparing for this moment my entire life, she replied, her voice calm but firm. Let's make sure the truth speaks louder than lies. The defendants, Megan and Robert, entered the room visibly anxious. Megan's navy suit was crisp but ill-fitting in tension, her carefully coiffed hair slightly askew. Robert, broad-shouldered and once confident, now walked with a stooped posture, avoiding eye contact. Both were aware that Elalana's calm demeanor and the mountain of evidence against them were formidable. The proceedings began with a review of all prior testimonies and submitted evidence. Thomas presented the financial records, documents of unauthorized transactions, and the videos showing the defendant's attempted deception. Each piece was meticulously organized, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Judge Reynolds, a seasoned figure known for his meticulous attention to detail, leaned forward. We will proceed with the closing statements. Mrs. Crawford, your counsel may begin. Thomas spoke first, outlining the clear timeline of events and emphasizing the deliberate nature of Megan and Robert's actions. This case is not merely about property. It is about trust, deception, and the exploitation of familial bonds for personal gain. Mrs. Crawford, at 70 years old, has faced betrayal from those closest to her. Yet, she stands here, composed, resolute, and dignified, proving the stark contrast between truth and manipulation. Elalana took a deep breath, rising to address the court herself. Her round, mature face reflected years of wisdom and the gravity of the moment. Judge, members of the jury, she began, her voice steady and commanding. I have loved this family, trusted them, and given them every opportunity to act honorably. Instead, I was betrayed, deceived, and targeted for personal gain. This is not just about MIT, it's about accountability and the principle that deceit, even within a family, cannot go unchallenged. Her eyes met Robert's briefly, and she continued, Robert, you are my son. It pains me to say this, but your actions have forced my hand. Megan, your ambition led you to manipulate and deceive, believing that your schemes would go unchallenged. Today, we set a precedent. Truth and integrity prevail. The courtroom remained silent, hanging on every word. Even the gallery of spectators felt the weight of the confrontation. An older woman, slightly heavier, standing firmly against betrayal, unshaken by intimidation or manipulation. Thomas concluded, the evidence is clear. The defendants acted in concert to commit fraud, to misappropriate property, and to undermine Mrs. Crawford. Justice demands that these actions be rectified and accountability enforced. Megan attempted to respond, but her voice faltered. This isn't fair. We didn't mean. Elilanor's eyes did not waver. Intent is irrelevant when actions cause harm. You knew what you were doing. You planned it, you executed it, and now, you must face the consequences. Judge Reynolds nodded gravely. Thank you, Mrs. Crawford. We will now review all evidence and deliberate on the findings. A verdict will be reached shortly. While waiting for the court's decision, Elilana walked through the courthouse hallways. The slightly heavier frame carried herself with dignity, and she noticed the curious glances from others, respect mingled with admiration. She knew that beyond this courtroom, the world watched a woman reclaim justice, not through brute force, but through preparation, intellect, and unwavering courage. Minutes turned to hours. Finally, the judge returned, documents in hand. After careful consideration, the court finds in favor of Mrs. Elilana Crawford. All claims brought forth by Megan Nolan and Robert Crawford regarding alleged incompetency and property rights are dismissed. Furthermore, the court orders restitution and legal penalties for fraudulent activities committed by the defendants. Relief washed over but it was tempered with a quiet sadness for the relationships that could no longer be mended. Megan's shoulders slumped in defeat, and Robert's face reflected both remorse and resignation. Thomas clapped Elilana lightly on the shoulder. It's over. You've won. Elilana exhaled slowly. Not just won. Justice has been served. That's what matters. As they left the courthouse, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. She answered politely, but firmly, emphasizing the importance of integrity, accountability, and the dangers of deception. Back at her home, Elilana sat by the large bay window, overlooking the ocean. Her mature, round face reflected contentment, but also contemplation. She had reclaimed her home, her dignity, and her rights, but at the cost of familial trust. Yet, the lesson was clear. Resilience, preparation, and courage could overcome even the most calculated betrayals. That night, as the moonlight shimmered on the waves, Elilana reflected on the journey, from betrayal and fear to strategic confrontation and ultimate victory. She had navigated a labyrinth of deception and emerged unbroken. Her slightly fuller figure, her age, her lived experience, they were not weaknesses, but sources of strength. She sipped her tea, letting the quiet settle around her. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of rebuilding relationships where possible, fortifying her legacy, and ensuring that truth remained unassailable. For now, she allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. Justice had been reclaimed, and the storm had passed. The sun rose gently over Elilana Crawford's beach house, casting golden reflections across the waves. At 70, with her slightly heavier frame draped elegantly in a teal blouse and beige skirt, she felt a serenity she hadn't known in decades. Her round, expressive face bore traces of the battles fought, but her eyes shone with the quiet confidence of someone who had reclaimed her dignity. 2 weeks had passed since the courtroom victory. Megan and Robert had complied with all court orders, returning the stolen jewelry, paying fines, and completing mandated community service. The house, now secure, felt truly hers once more. Elilana had changed the locks, installed new security cameras, and even hired a part-time housekeeper, not because she couldn't maintain the house herself, but to ensure that no one could ever invade her sanctuary again. Sitting on her terrace with a cup of chamomile tea, she reflected on the whirlwind of events. Betrayal by her son had been the deepest wound, but it revealed truths she hadn't wanted to see. Robert's pride had outweighed his filial duty. Megan's desperation had clouded her judgment. Together, they had underestimated the power of preparation, experience, and integrity. The courtroom had been a stage, but life was the ongoing performance. Elilana's victory wasn't just legal, it was moral, psychological, and emotional. She had shown the world that age and body type did not dictate capability. Her 70 years, her slightly fuller figure, her lifetime of discipline and wisdom, they had become her armor. One afternoon, she received an unexpected call. It was Veronica, Megan's sister. Elilana, she said, voice trembling. We just wanted to apologize personally. Megan sent the jewelry. She says she regrets everything. Robert won't come, but she wanted to make things right. Elilana smiled faintly. Veronica, I accept the gesture, but understand this: some bridges cannot be rebuilt. Integrity, dignity, and respect cannot be compromised and then fully restored. Let her learn from the consequences of her actions. In the following months, Elilana immersed herself in projects she had long delayed. She donated part of her wealth to local charities, volunteered at community centers, and even started a small scholarship for young women seeking independence and self-sufficiency. Each act was a reaffirmation of her values: justice, self-reliance, and empowerment. Robert, on the other hand, remained distant. His occasional letters hinted at remorse, but he could not bridge the gap created by his own choices. Elalana understood that some lessons were only learned through experience, and that he had to live with the consequences of his actions. Home, Elalana's life found rhythm again. Her mornings began with a brisk walk along the shore, the salt air invigorating her senses. Her afternoons were spent reviewing financial investments, planning community initiatives, or simply reading in her sunlit study. Her slightly fuller body moved with confidence, each step a testament to the strength cultivated over 70 years of life. One evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon, painting the sky with shades of gold and crimson, Elalana sat in her favorite chair, looking over the house she had fought to protect. She allowed herself a rare, quiet laughter born not of triumph over others, but of survival, wisdom, and resilience. She had faced betrayal, humiliation, and fear and emerged stronger. Her phone buzzed with a message from Thomas Gallagher. Case closed. Justice served. You did it, Mrs. Crawford. She typed back simply, we did it. Life goes on. In that moment, Elalana Crawford was more than a survivor. She was a symbol of empowerment, a testament to preparation, intelligence, and unwavering moral courage. Her home was safe, her finances secure, and her dignity intact. The world had underestimated her, but she had proven beyond any doubt that experience, determination, and integrity could overcome even the most calculated betrayal. As night fell, she looked out over the waves, the rhythmic crash of water soothing her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, and new beginnings. But for now, Elalana sat in peace, a woman who had reclaimed her life, her home, and her sense of justice. And in the quiet of the evening, with the moon reflecting on the sea, she felt truly, deeply free.